On August 6, 1945, at 8:15 in the morning, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. As modeled here, the atomic bomb, codenamed Little Boy, was the first nuclear weapon dropped on humans. It was an attack during World War II, and there was no warning given. Carried by a B-29 warplane, the bomb was dropped from about 31,000 feet and fell for 43 seconds. It exploded about 1,900 feet off the ground. Inside the bomb, a controlled explosion created with high explosives propelled a subcritical mass of uranium-235 down a long tube, similar to the barrel of a gun, where it collided with a second subcritical mass of uranium-235. The collision triggered a nuclear fission chain reaction, which detonated the bomb. It detonated with the same force as 15,000 tons of TNT, forming a mushroom cloud about 60,000 feet tall and releasing radiation into the air. The explosion resulted in a flash of blinding light, followed by intense heat, killing an estimated 80,000 people instantly and destroying nearly every building within 1 mile of the epicenter. Fires caused by the explosion's intense heat lasted for days, destroying more than a 4-square-mile area from the epicenter. Over 50% of the people that were killed died of burns. Many of those that weren't killed by the flash burn, blast, or fire died of radiation poisoning. Others were trapped in rubble, and thousands were injured. The health effects, including cancer and birth defects, have been felt for generations. Three days later, another atomic bomb, made with plutonium, was dropped on Nagasaki, killing at least 74,000 people.
The process of making nuclear bombs like Little Boy and Fat Man is quite interesting. The process itself signifies the reason why the atom bombs are considered to be the most powerful weapons which can wipe out 2 cities. It all started in 1905 when Albert Einstein came up with his most famous equation, E equals to mc squared. The fission reaction process includes the atoms to split up into pieces. For example, when a neutron hits an atom of a radioactive material like uranium, the uranium atom splits into 2 smaller atoms and some energy is released. And if right type of uranium is used, the split will produce more neutrons, capable of splitting other uranium atoms. This continuous process is called a chain reaction. If the reaction is uncontrolled, we get a nuclear explosion. To fuel the atomic bomb, uranium-235 or plutonium-239 can be used. These materials are highly radioactive, which means they constantly strain neutrons required to split atom and generate energy. But these materials must be held in a compressed state long enough before explosion. There are 2 approaches for doing this. The first one is the gun method, which was used in the Little Boy. The gun is considered the simplest way to build nuclear weapon. The weapon consists of a tube in which one half of the nuclear charge is fixed at one end and the other half is at the opposite end. An explosive is placed behind the other half of the nuclear material. When the explosive is detonated, the nuclear charge races down to the other end. Once these 2 halves meet, the chain reaction starts and the explosion takes place. The second approach is the implosion method, which was used in the Fat Man. In this approach, the nuclear fuel is shaped into a sphere called the pit, and the explosives are placed around it. When these explosives are detonated, the force squeezes the pit and explosion takes place. The explosives should be placed in such a manner that the shock waves generated should be precisely spherical in shape and should be detonated at the same time. These designs also require an initiator to flood the pit with neutrons during detonation.
After falling for 43 seconds, the time and barometric triggers started the firing mechanism. A uranium bullet fired down a barrel into a uranium target. Together, they started a nuclear chain reaction. Solid matter began to come apart, releasing untold quantities of energy.
Can we forget the flash? Suddenly 30,000 in street disappeared. In the crushed depths of darkness, the shrinks of 50,000 died out when the swirling yellow smoke thinned. Buildings split, bridges collapsed. Packed trains rested Sindh. Before long, a line of naked bodies walking in group crying, with skin hanging down like rags, hands on chest, city of 300,000. Can we forget that silence? In that stillness, the powerful appeal of the white eye sockets of the wives. And the children who didn't return home, that tore apart our hearts. Can it be forgotten?
Such was the devastation of the explosion that corpses lie on the parade grounds like stone images of Jesus dispersed in all directions. On the banks of the river, lying on top of another, were a group that had crawled to a tethered raft. And when the morning sun shone on a group of schoolgirls who had fled and were lying in the armory, in their excrement, the bellies swollen, one eye crushed, and half of their bodies raw flesh with skin ripped off. Such was the devastation of the explosion.
So my dear friends, today I'm going to share with you the heart-touching story of Julien, age 75 and currently living in Nagasaki. He is one of the survivors of the atomic blast of Nagasaki. Yasujiro Tanaka once in his testimony narrated his story about the survival of atomic blast of Nagasaki. He begins the story like this. I was 3 years old at the time of the bombing. I don't remember much, but I do recall that my surroundings turned blindingly white, like a million cameras flashes going down at once. Then, pitch darkness. I was buried alive under the house. I have been told that when my uncle found me and pulled my tiny 3-year-old body from the debris, I was unconscious. My face was misshapen and he was certainly thinking that I was dead. But thankfully, I wasn't. I survived. But since that day, mysterious scabs began to form all over my body. I lost my hearing and due to the air blast presumably. More than a decade after this, my mother started noticing glass shards growing all over her skin. Debris from the day of the bombing presumably. My younger sister suffers from chronic muscle cramps till this day. She asks, what did I do to the Americans? Why did they do this to me? She often asks. I have seen a lot of pain in my long years, but truthfully, I have lived a good life. And as a first-hand witness to this atrocity, my only desire is to live a full life, hopefully in a world where people are kind to each other and kind to themselves. Thank you.
I would be narrating another poignant story of Fujio Torikoshi, aged 86 now, living in Hiroshima, which would surely take you back in time. Fujio begins the story like this. On the morning of August 6, I was preparing to go to the hospital with my mother. I had been diagnosed with cake, which is a vitamin deficiency disorder. I was diagnosed a few days earlier and had taken the day off school to get a medical exam. Now, as my mother and I were eating breakfast, I heard the deep rumble of engines overhead. Our ears were trained back then, and I knew it was a B-29 immediately. I stepped out into the field, out front, but saw no planes. Bewildered, I glanced to the northeast. I saw a black dot in the sky. Suddenly it burst. It burst into a ball of blinding light that filled my surroundings. A gust of hot wind hit my face. I instantly closed my eyes and knelt to the ground. As I tried to gain footing, another gust of wind hit my face and lifted me up. I hit something hard. I do not remember what happened after that. When I finally came back to my senses, I realized that I passed out in front of a stone water container. Suddenly I felt an intense burning sensation on my face and my arms, my whole body. And I tried to dunk my body into that stone water container. The water made it even worse. I heard my mother's voice in the distance. Fujio! Fujio! I clung to her desperately as she scooped me up in her arms. It burns, Mama, it burns. I drifted in and out of consciousness for the next few days. My face swelled up so badly that I couldn't even open my eyes. I was treated briefly at an air raid shelter and later at a hospital in Hatsukaichi, and was eventually brought home, wrapped in bandages all over my body. I was unconscious for the next few days and fighting a high fever. I finally woke up. I woke up to a stream of light filtering in through the bandages over my eyes, and my mother sitting beside me, playing a lullaby on her harmonica. I was told that I had until about age 20 to live. Yet here I am. Here I am 7 decades later, age 86. All I want to do is forget the past. But the prominent keloid scar on my neck is a daily reminder of the atomic bomb. We cannot continue to sacrifice precious lives to warfare. All I can do is pray earnestly, relentlessly for world peace. Thank you very much.
Hiroshima today looks completely different than it did 73 years ago. It has recovered into a bustling manufacturing hub with a population of 1.1 million people. The daily routines of the life of people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are similar to any other large city in Japan. Hiroshima has launched a forward-looking planning process called Hiroshima 2045, when it will become a city of peace and creativity with a focus on designing a modern, distinctive urban landscape. Thank you.